In the beginning, before the first dawn dared to stretch its pale fingers across the sky, the night ruled as a vast and breathing entity, a living tapestry woven from shadow, silence, and the rhythmic pulse of celestial hearts. Coyolxauhqui, the moon unborn and yet already dreaming, floated within this darkness as a presence both tender and formidable, her essence gathering like silver dew on the lips of eternity. Around her, the other children of the sky stirred, stars humming their crystalline lullabies, comets tracing delicate arcs across the void, and distant worlds turning in slow, contemplative circles. But none glowed with her quiet intensity. None trembled with her longing. None carried within them the same yearning to be seen, adored, and remembered. In those earliest breaths of existence, when creation was still soft and malleable, Coyolxauhqui's aura shimmered like a promise, fragile, luminous, and tinged with the sensual warmth of a destiny not yet spoken. Coyolxauhqui drifted through the endless expanse, her form soft as moonlight and sharp as obsidian. She was a goddess shaped by contradictions, serenity layered over restlessness, devotion laced with the quiet ache of resentment. The stars adored her, clinging to her glow like droplets of frost. Yet even their admiration could not soothe the simmering emotion she kept buried. She sensed, always, the stirring in her mother's womb, a new presence, a new radiance threatening to emerge and claim the sky. Though she could not yet name it, she felt it like a pressure blooming behind her ribs, a subtle tightening in the air around her. She held herself with regal poise, though deep within, a storm of unspoken fears churned. Her brothers watched her from afar, whispering among themselves, uncertain whether her brilliance was a blessing or a prelude to something more volatile. But Coyolxauhqui paid them little mind. Her gaze remained fixed on the horizon, where fate lurked unseen, waiting. The night held a sensual stillness, as though aware of Coyolxauhqui's inner tremor. Veins of silver threaded the horizon, not yet forming the moon, but promising it, foreshadowing a future in which her radiance might claim its rightful crown. Yet the promise felt fragile, like a gift that might dissolve into vapor if she reached too boldly for it. Beneath her graceful composure, a restlessness curled serpentine and warm. The cosmic family watched her with cautious eyes, her brothers orbiting at respectful distances, the stars humming soft encouragements she could not fully hear. Coyolxauhqui embraced the shadows whenever doubt crept in, allowing the coolness to soothe her like a gentle hand against her cheek. Still, the faint glimmer of impending change tugged at her thoughts, urging her towards a path she did not yet understand, one marked by both brilliance and heartbreak. In those primordial nights, the shadows themselves felt animate, dragging across her skin like soft charcoal strokes, painted by an unseen hand. Coyolxauhqui often wandered among them, letting their coolness drape over her shoulders and pool at her feet. The darkness whispered truths the stars dared not speak, truths about change, about rebirth, about the inevitability of endings disguised as beginnings. She listened with half-closed eyes, her breath sinking with the slow rhythm of the universe, as though trying to memorize the pulse of creation itself. When she exhaled, the shadows curled around her wrists, her waist, her throat, as if trying to anchor her in this moment before everything transformed. She allowed them their silent embrace, understanding that even illusions could offer comfort in a world trembling on the brink of revelation. Textures defined the world around her, textures that breathed emotion into the void. The velvet fold of night wrapping her in quiet intimacy, the rough grit of stardust brushing her ankles like affectionate hands, the slick coolness of cosmic winds tracing the line of her spine. These sensations grounded her, reminding her that even a goddess could crave contact, reassurance, the simple comfort of feeling seen. She often tilted her face upward, longing for a reflection of herself in the vast mirror of the cosmos, but the sky remained mute, withholding. That silence stirred a pang of longing deep within her, an ache as soft as silk and sharp as longing itself. She wondered if her glow would ever find a place to settle, a purpose that would not wither beneath the brilliance of another. Even the stars sensed the coming fracture. Their songs turned softer, more plaintive, like notes plucked from a trembling instrument. They gathered closer around Coyolxauhqui, trying to warm her with their fragile glow. She accepted their light with a bittersweet smile, grateful yet distant, as though already drifting toward a fate she could not escape. She could feel the horizon shifting, morphing into something new. The darkness trembled with anticipation, and each tremor resonated through her body like a quiet warning. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the coolness of her own skin, imagining for a fleeting moment that the universe itself held her close. But the comfort faded as quickly as it came, leaving only the echo of warmth and the awareness that something immense pressed nearer with every passing breath. The heavens grew heavier as the nights passed, laden with moisture, scent, and unspoken dread. Lightning flickered at the edges of creation, illuminating fleeting glimpses of Coyolxauhqui's form, her eyes shimmering with defiance, her hands trembling despite her attempts at stillness, her silhouette outlined in silver, as delicate as a tear. She walked the sky with measured grace, each step stirring ancient dust that glowed momentarily before fading. Every movement carried the weight of a future pressing itself upon her, shaping her path even as she tried to resist. The world below shifted in its slumber, sensing the tension above, vibrating with anticipation. Coyolxauhqui pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heartbeat rise like a drum calling her toward an uncertain dawn. The night reached its most fragile point when the first tremor of dawn shimmered faintly across the horizon. Coyolxauhqui felt the shift immediately, the subtle intrusion of light, the thinning of shadows, the air tightening as though bracing for revelation. Her pulse quickened, blending with the trembling sky. She closed her eyes, letting the cool breath of the universe kiss her cheeks, her brow, her lips. The moment felt sacred and intimate, as though the cosmos itself wished to offer her comfort before fate inevitably unraveled. She stood poised between darkness and the faintest hint of light, feeling the world tilt beneath her feet. The silence deepened, vibrating with the resonance of a truth she had not yet uncovered, but felt with every fiber of her being. In that fragile, wavering instant, she stood alone in the heart of the cosmos, suspended between what she was and what she feared becoming. The sky around her held its breath, waiting. The world below stirred in its eternal sleep, and Coyolxauhqui, her essence quivering like a moonbeam caught in the tide, whispered a silent vow into the trembling night. No matter what rose from the womb of her mother, no matter what destiny sought to eclipse her light, she would not fade quietly into the dark. Her story would carve itself into the heavens, etched in silver and shadow for all eternity. She felt the universe shift again, a subtle tightening like the intake of a breath before a secret breaks free. Within that delicate tension, something inside her loosened, an acceptance tinged with trembling hope for whatever shape her destiny would soon reveal. She brushed her fingers through the darkness, feeling its cool silk respond as though alive, and realized the night leaned toward her, yearning for her glow before it had even taken form. In that quiet communion, Coyolxauhqui sensed a promise that her light, when it finally emerged, would alter the sky in ways no dawn could erase. The thought settled in her like warm starlight, steadying her breath and drawing her closer to the silent truth waiting beyond the horizon. A new beginning stirred just ahead now.
Coyolxauhqui emerged from the trembling dusk like a figure sculpted from moon-kissed alabaster, her presence both commanding and unbearably fragile. Her divinity shimmered across her skin as if the night itself adored her and refused to release its touch. Yet beneath that celestial glow lived a human ache, a tenderness she never showed except when the shadows stretched thin around her. She carried pride like a crown carved from silver crescents, delicate yet sharp enough to draw blood. And still, within that same pride dwelt a longing she could not smother, a yearning to be cherished, admired, remembered not merely as a daughter of the sky, but as a force worthy of devotion. In her eyes flickered an emotion, both fierce and trembling, a quiet vulnerability she pressed beneath layers of poise. She was divine, yes, but her divinity was not built from perfection. It was woven from contradictions, from luminous strength wrapped around aching softness. Around her, her sisters shimmered like constellations scattered across the dark horizon. They were warriors, radiant and fierce, each forged from fragments of starfire and maternal might. Yet their brilliance only sharpened Coyolxauhqui's sense of isolation. Their laughter, bright as ringing obsidian, echoed through the heavens with effortless confidence, while Coyolxauhqui's smile often carried a strain she tried to hide. Her sisters loved her in their own distant way, but their presence stirred something restless inside her, a desire to stand above them, to step beyond their collective glow and carve her own path through the sky.
They reminded her of expectations she had not chosen, roles she did not embrace, and a destiny that pressed like cool metal against her spine. Each sister, without meaning to, magnified her quiet insecurity and ignited her determination to shine in her own right. Her brothers moved differently, orbiting with solemn grace as though carved from the deep stillness of night. They rarely spoke, but when they did, their voices vibrated like distant thunder, steady and sure. Their loyalty to the celestial order, to rituals and hierarchy, cast a long shadow over Coyolxauhqui's restless spirit. They admired her composure, her elegance, her luminous strength, but their admiration carried expectations that weighed heavily upon her. They wanted her to remain serene, dutiful, unshaken. They wanted her to be a model of lunar grace untouched by doubt or desire. Yet every word they spoke unknowingly widened the rift within her, feeding that secret longing to shatter the mold she had been given. Their presence shaped her fears, sharpening the edges of her uncertainty, reminding her that she did not wholly belong to the place they imagined for her.
And beneath the sky's trembling vault, inside the sacred womb of Coyolxauhqui, another presence stirred. A presence that would define the very axis of Coyolxauhqui's emotional world. Though still unborn, Huitzilopochtli existed like a blade hidden beneath layers of soft earth, his radiance not yet revealed, but already pressing outward with unrestrained power. Coyolxauhqui felt him more than she understood him, a pulse of destiny that throbbed across her nerves and tightened her breath. His impending arrival was not simply the birth of a sibling, it was the promise of upheaval. She sensed that his light, raw, piercing, sun-forged, would not merely illuminate the sky, but carve through it, rearranging the cosmic hierarchy that had long defined her place. In this unborn brother, Coyolxauhqui found the source of her unspoken dread, the figure who would soon embody everything she feared losing: her relevance, her brilliance, her fragile sovereignty. Coyolxauhqui herself loomed as a paradox of warmth and terror, a goddess whose love spilled like fertile earth, yet whose presence inspired trembling reverence. She was the mother who nurtured the stars, the moon, and the restless tides of creation, but she was also the one whose choices forged conflict without apology. Her pregnancy, sacred and enigmatic, carved a deep fracture through the celestial family. Coyolxauhqui revered her, feared her, yearned for her approval, and resented the secrecy that now enveloped her. Coyolxauhqui's silence shaped Coyolxauhqui's wounds more deeply than any weapon could. It whispered to her that she was no longer the center of her mother's universe, that a new radiance swelled in the womb to eclipse her silvery glow. The goddess of earth and life, without speaking a word, magnified Coyolxauhqui's longing to reclaim a love she felt slipping away. Even the stars played their part in shaping her emotional landscape. They adored Coyolxauhqui with unshakable devotion, flickering with excitement whenever she drifted near. Their shimmering forms gravitated toward her like petals drawn to the moonlit tide, whispering admiration in tiny crystalline voices. Yet their adoration never reached the depth she craved. They loved her beauty, her grace, her celestial allure, but not the trembling vulnerability she hid beneath the surface. Their worship was sweet but shallow, offering affection without understanding. And this shallow affection deepened her loneliness, making her long even more intensely for someone who would see beyond her glow and touch the storm pulsing beneath her serenity. Their devotion, in its gentleness, sharpened the void within her, reminding her that admiration could never replace connection.
The cosmic winds, invisible yet ever-present, brushed against Coyolxauhqui like warm breath along her skin, stirring sensations she did not entirely understand. They carried whispers of change, hints of truths not yet revealed, and every touch from their invisible fingers made her pulse quicken. They moved around her with reverence, as though recognizing the fragility beneath her pride, the trembling softness she tried to conceal. In their swirling currents, she found fleeting comfort, but also reminders of her own impermanence. The winds shaped her desires by urging her toward transformation, nudging her closer to the precipice she feared yet could not resist. They whispered of destiny, not as a chain, but as a river, one she would soon be forced to enter, whether she wished to or not. Even the moonlight she had not yet fully become seemed to respond to her emotions, shimmering in uneven waves whenever her thoughts grew heavy. It clung to her like a lover, yearning to soothe her unrest, illuminating the contours of her form with delicate affection. But that same light also exposed her rawness, revealing every fracture in her composure, every unspoken fear, every flicker of doubt she could not hide. It magnified the complexity of her soul, pride intertwined with yearning, defiance entangled with vulnerability. Her own future radiance shaped her from the inside out, reminding her that she was destined not merely to reflect the world, but to confront it with a glow born from both suffering and strength. In the distance, the unborn sun god pulsed again, a rhythm she could not escape. It called to her like a challenge, daring her to acknowledge the magnitude of the shift he would bring. In that pulse, she felt both the threat to her identity and the spark of something deeper, an emotional collision brewing between her fear of being overshadowed and her longing to be irreplaceable. Every character surrounding her, her silent brothers, fierce sisters, enigmatic mother, adoring stars, whispering winds, and the unborn force soon to burst into existence, shaped the labyrinth within her heart. They sculpted her desires, fed her anxieties, deepened her wounds, and heightened her yearning. And in the luminous tension of this celestial family,
Coyolxauhqui stood at the center, her soul a fragile sphere of moonlight trembling on the brink of transformation. Coyolxauhqui felt the sky tightening around her, as if the very fabric of the heavens sensed the storm gathering within her chest. Conflict did not arrive with weapons or shouts, but as a trembling beneath her ribs, a pressure that shaped itself into longing so potent it blurred the edges of her composure. She yearned for recognition as fervently as she yearned for harmony, wanting to be seen not merely as a daughter of the night, but as its sovereign, its luminous heart. Yet with every passing moment, that yearning clashed against the duties she had inherited, the expectation to remain serene, dutiful, unshaken. Each breath she drew tasted like defiance, and each heartbeat throbbed with the quiet insistence that something within her could no longer stay contained. Her desires pulsed through her like molten silver, slow but scorching, reshaping her from the inside out. As the unborn radiance of Huitzilopochtli surged behind her mother's womb, Coyolxauhqui's longing contorted into something sharper. It was no longer merely the desire to be cherished, but the desire to hold her place in a universe that suddenly seemed to tilt away from her. Every impulse within her reached toward the throne she felt slipping, toward a glory she feared would be overshadowed by a light not yet born. She had always imagined herself rising, not falling. She had always believed her destiny would expand, not shrink. But now, with each pulse of that unborn sun, she felt her future narrowing into something she had not chosen. Desire twisted into fear, and fear fermented into the seed of conflict that rooted itself deeper with each trembling night. She walked along the edges of the heavens, feeling the cool stardust brushing against her ankles like promises she could not touch. Her siblings watched her from afar, sensing the tension radiating from her, but none dared draw near. Her sisters, warriors forged in starfire, whispered among themselves, their voices clipped with unease. Her brothers observed in stoic silence, their gazes heavy with unspoken judgment. Coyolxauhqui felt isolated within her own divine family, longing for connection while suffocating beneath expectations she could no longer bear. A fragile thought unfurled inside her. What if she sought her own path, separate from the roles forced upon her? What if she carved her identity not from obedience, but from desire? The thought glittered like a forbidden jewel, luminous and dangerous. The celestial winds seemed to sense her turmoil, swirling around her in restless currents. They carried whispers of truths she had tried to ignore, that the birth of her brother meant change, transformation, even upheaval. They whispered that destiny, once set into motion, could not be halted by pride or fear. And yet they also whispered of choice, of the possibility that desire could become a force powerful enough to shape its own path. Coyolxauhqui's breath hitched when the winds curled around her throat like an embrace, urging her towards something she could not yet name. She closed her eyes, letting their invisible fingers trace the tension along her shoulders, and for a moment she imagined surrendering to the pull of destiny. But surrender felt like dissolving, like fading, like allowing her own light to vanish beneath another's brilliance.
A heat flickered deep inside her, subtle at first, then rising with increasing persistence. It was not anger, though it brushed close to that line. It was not fear, though it tingled with uncertainty. It was desire, raw, unfiltered, luminous, demanding that she stand against the tide pressing toward her. She wanted to protect her place in the heavens, to defend the fragile identity she had spent countless ages shaping. She wanted to be more than a reflection. She wanted to be a force. The heat spread through her limbs, making her movement sharper, her breath shallower, her emotions more volatile. She gazed at the trembling horizon and felt the future pressing closer, relentless as the coming dawn. Her mother's silence deepened the wound festering inside her. Coyolxauhqui, who had once guided her with gentle firmness, now offered nothing but mystery. Coyolxauhqui approached her in the stillness of the night, seeking answers, reassurance, anything that might soothe the storm within her. But Coyolxauhqui's eyes were distant, her thoughts cocooned around the life growing inside her. Her silence felt like betrayal, even if it was not meant as one. Coyolxauhqui's throat tightened as she stood before the goddess who had once been her anchor, feeling herself slip through her mother's grasp like water through clenched fingers. Desire sharpened again, twisting into a deeper need. The need to reclaim the love she felt being redirected towards someone not yet born. Her sister's vigilance stoked her insecurity further. They moved in formation, unified and unwavering, their gazes following every shift in Coyolxauhqui's demeanor. She could see concern reflected in their bright eyes, but also fear. Fear that she might unravel, fear that her restlessness might ignite something unstoppable. Their hesitation wounded her pride, as though they viewed her not as their equal, but as a storm on the verge of breaking. Coyolxauhqui turned away from them with a soft, bitter laugh, the sound echoing across the sky like a cracked bell. Their doubt only fueled her longing for independence, for a destiny she could shape with her own trembling hands, rather than inheriting it from ancient cosmic designs. Each night, the unborn sun pulsed stronger, radiating from the womb of Coyolxauhqui. Its rhythm seeped into the atmosphere, thinning the shadows, sharpening the stars. Coyolxauhqui felt each pulse as a strike against her chest, as if this unborn brother already challenged her claim to the heavens. She told herself she did not fear him, but fear threaded itself beneath her denial, weaving tight knots through her heart. She imagined his arrival, bright, overwhelming, impossible to ignore, and felt a twist of longing for the time before his presence disrupted the balance of her world. She longed for the certainty she once held, for the serenity that no longer came easily.
And yet, beneath that longing trembled another truth. She desired something new, something unbound by the expectations suffocating her. She desired her own transformation, even if she did not yet know what shape it would take. The stars dimmed when her emotions surged, their shimmering light flickering uncertainly. They adored her, yes, but they also sensed the instability growing within her. Their trembling glow reflected the conflict she felt, a desperate desire to preserve the harmony of the celestial family, and an equally powerful desire to break free from the constraints tying her to a destiny not her own. Their gentle pulses softened her resolve momentarily, reminding her of the beauty in unity, in connection, in shared radiance. But that softness evaporated whenever her thoughts returned to the unborn force in her mother's womb. Her desire to keep her place warred with her yearning to redefine it entirely, and the tension between these two desires stretched her thin as a thread of moonlight. As the nights passed, Coyolxauhqui found herself standing on the threshold of something she could not yet name. Every sensation intensified, the coolness of the night, the distant hymn of stars, the trembling warmth curling inside her. It felt as though the universe itself leaned toward her, breathless, waiting. Destiny loomed like a tidal force pressing against her back, urging her toward transformation, while desire pulled her from the front, coaxing her toward rebellion, independence, self-creation. She stood suspended between them, her heart a battlefield where longing and fear clashed with every beat. And in that delicate, quivering balance, Coyolxauhqui felt the truth rising within her as a second heartbeat. The conflict she faced was no longer external. It was born from the collision of her deepest desires. Something inevitable approached, something that would either shatter her or liberate her. The night held its breath, and Coyolxauhqui, burning with need, stood trembling at the edge of destiny. Coyolxauhqui felt the universe tightening around her, as though the sky itself had drawn a slow, deliberate breath and refused to release it. The weight of countless nights pressed against her chest, pushing her toward a point where longing, fear, and desire could no longer coexist without tearing something open. She sensed the moment approaching, not as a sudden strike, but as a gradual unraveling within her, a soft fraying of composure that began at the edges of her being and crept inward. Every tremor in the cosmos echoed her own rising turmoil, and every flicker of starlight sharpened the ache blossoming beneath her skin. She stood suspended between what she had been and what she was about to become, the air around her trembling with the tension of collapse and transcendence converging into a single inevitable point. The pulse of Coyolxauhqui, still unborn, still hidden, grew unbearable in its intensity. Each beat radiated like a shock wave, luminous and forceful, striking at the fragile balance Coyolxauhqui clung to. She had endured it for countless nights, telling herself she could hold steady, that she could absorb the pressure. But now the vibrations coursed through her like molten fire, shaking loose every unspoken fear she had buried within herself. It was as though the unborn sun god's light reached into her, illuminating the darkest corners of her yearning with merciless clarity. She felt exposed, raw, trembling with a vulnerability she had spent lifetimes concealing. And yet, beneath that exposure unfurled a sensual warmth, an overwhelming sense of awakening, of becoming something more, something painfully radiant. She tried to steady her breath, tried to anchor herself in the embrace of the night she had always called home, but even the darkness seemed to retreat, peeling away from her form as though pushed back by the pressure gathering beneath her skin. Shadows slipped from her like silk, falling from trembling shoulders, leaving her bathed in an eerie glow that did not feel entirely her own. Her limbs felt too light, too fragile, as if they no longer bound to the physicality she once knew. Sensation flooded her, coolness rushing over her skin, warmth spiraling upward through her spine, a tingling pressure blossoming behind her ribs. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her heartbeat stutter into a frantic rhythm that matched the trembling of the cosmos. She was losing herself, yet becoming more herself than ever before. Her sisters' voices reached her as distant echoes, each call laced with confusion, fear, and something like heartbreak. They did not understand what was happening, could not grasp the collision unfolding inside her. Their steps thundered across the heavens, their movements swift and desperate as they approached the trembling figure of their moonlit sister. Coyolxauhqui wanted to reach for them, to tell them she was still here, still whole, still grasping at the threads of her identity. But words caught in her throat, dissolving into breathy gasps as the pressure inside her rose higher, sharper, unbearably bright. She felt as though her entire being were stretching into something too vast for her own form to contain. When Coyolxauhqui finally appeared, her presence ignited the tension to its breaking point. The mother who had once held Coyolxauhqui in tender arms now radiated the overwhelming force of imminent creation. The air around her shimmered with the energy of birth, of renewal, of devastating transformation. Coyolxauhqui's gaze locked with her mother's, and in that moment every wound, every longing, every unspoken plea surged to the surface. She saw love there, deep, vast, ancient, but it was a love divided, a love stretched between worlds, between children, between destinies. That fracture pierced Coyolxauhqui like a blade. Her body shuddered as the pain rippled through her, but intertwined with that pain was a tremor of revelation, of understanding that hurt and healed in equal measure. The first shock came not as an explosion, but as a luminous tear threading through her core. She felt her form soften, melt, shimmer, as though she were made of moonlight pulled too tightly across the sky. Her vision blurred, the edges of the world smearing into long strokes of silver and shadow. Sensation intensified until it bordered on ecstasy, an overwhelming convergence of heat and cold, of contraction and release, of dissolution and awakening. Her limbs trembled, her body arching as light surged through her in violent waves. The universe seemed to tilt beneath her feet, and for a brief, suspended moment, she felt weightless, boundless, infinite. Her siblings rushed toward her, but before their hands could reach her, the pressure inside her burst. Light exploded from her chest in a silent scream, radiating outward in shimmering streams that carved patterns across the sky. Coyolxauhqui felt herself splitting, her essence stretching into countless fragments of silver radiance. The sensation was excruciating and intoxicating all at once. Pain lanced through her like 1,000 shards of obsidian, but each shard carried with it a strange awakening, a realization that she was not breaking apart, but expanding, transforming into something the world had not yet imagined. Her breath hitched as she felt her identity unraveling, each piece glowing with a tenderness she had never allowed herself to feel. The world around her blurred into waves of brilliance, the stars spinning into spirals of shimmering tears. She felt herself falling, not downward, but inward, sinking into the core of her own being, where fear and desire intertwined like coiling serpents. In that free fall, she found herself face to face with every longing she had denied. The yearning to be loved without condition, the craving to shine without comparison, the desire to be seen as both fierce and fragile, powerful and wounded. These desires pulsed within her, luminous and alive, and for the first time she did not push them away. She embraced them, even as her form fragmented into trembling crescents of light. The collapse came in a single, breathtaking moment. Coyolxauhqui's body dissolved into a storm of silver fragments, each piece drifting away like petals cast into the wind. But instead of fading, each fragment glowed brighter, expanding into trails of light that wove themselves across the sky. Her consciousness stretched with them, her awareness expanding into something vast and ethereal. She no longer felt bound by form or expectation. Instead, she felt illuminated from within, her essence scattered yet united, her identity shattered yet reborn in the shimmer of every drifting piece. As the light settled into its new celestial pattern, Coyolxauhqui felt a profound stillness bloom within her, an aching calm that resonated through her fragments like a soft hum. She understood then that her transformation was not an ending, but a reconfiguration, a transcendence born from the collision of betrayal, revelation, and longing. The brutality of her collapse had dissolved into an exquisite clarity, a sensual unfolding of who she had always been beneath the layers of pride and fear. Her radiance stretched across the heavens, fragile and eternal, forming the first true moon. And in that luminous expanse, Coyolxauhqui finally felt seen. Not as a daughter overshadowed, nor as a warrior restrained, but as a celestial force whose beauty was born from both breaking and becoming. Her transformation glowed with a tenderness that wrapped the world in silver, a testament to the quiet, devastating power of her emotional awakening.
The silence that followed her breaking was unlike any silence Coyolxauhqui had ever known. It was not the absence of sound, but the soft settling of cosmic dust after a storm that had remade the sky. She felt herself scattered, yet strangely whole, as if the pieces of her being, though no longer held tightly in the form she once wore, had discovered a quieter, more enduring arrangement. In the stillness, she sensed the contours of a new existence forming, not bound by the weight of a warrior's armor, nor by the expectations that had pressed upon her since the first night she opened her silver eyes. Everything was both lighter and farther away, as though she were drifting through her own memories. Fragmentation did not feel like death, it felt like release. Her thoughts, dispersed across the expanse of the night, shimmered like droplets of moonlit water. She could feel the pull of the sky gently gathering her essence, stitching delicate threads of luminescence into a shape that was no longer a body, but a presence, a pulse. There was grief in that transition, a soft ache at the edges where longing still clung to what had been hers, her ambitions, her fierce pride, her desire to carve her place among the stars with the authority of her own voice. Yet the ache was no longer sharp. It drifted within her like a familiar shadow, deepening her glow rather than dimming it. The sky welcomed her not as a fallen warrior, but as something more elemental. She felt the cool sweep of celestial winds brush against her scattered memory, guiding her to a new center. Every moment became slower, more fluid, as if time itself had softened in her presence. She did not resist the gentle pull. Resistance had been the weight that once shaped her life, and now she found herself too weary, too open to fight it again. Instead, she let herself be carried upward, spread wider, dissolved into a halo of pale light, forming far above the world she had known. Below her, the earth seemed distant and quiet, an echo of the place where she had walked with certainty and doubt braided together in equal measure. She could not reach it anymore, not with hands or feet or the sharp clarity of commanding words, but she felt its rhythms beating faintly through the new form she inhabited. The mountains pulsed like memories of old battles. The lakes reflected her soft glow, turning her presence into trembling silver across their surfaces. Even the forests responded, their shadows stretching differently under her emerging light, as if recognizing her without needing to understand.
In this vastness, she felt the remnants of her siblings, scattered along their own paths. Their energies brushed faintly against her, familiar yet distant, each one a thread in the tapestry of a celestial family fractured by destiny. She sensed their sorrow, their confusion, their admiration, all tangled together in a way that made her pulse throb with quiet emotion. For the first time, the old conflict between them seemed small, not in its impact, but in its scale. They had all been caught in currents far larger than their individual wills, and now she floated above the remnants of those tides, wrapped not in bitterness, but in the faint shimmer of understanding. Huitzilopochtli's presence was the most distant, a fierce sunbeam cutting through the dark but not quite reaching her. She felt no hatred toward him, not anymore. The moment of their collision, once blinding with emotion, now seemed like a pivotal turning point rather than a wound. He had acted with the fire of destiny burning too brightly for him to carry alone. and she had moved with a moon's desire that refused to be dimmed. Their clash had been inevitable, as celestial bodies drawn into the same orbit often collide before settling into harmonious cycles. From her place in the sky, she saw him differently, not as the force that shattered her, but as the force that transformed her. The night accepted her transformation with gentle patience. As her scattered essence coalesced, she felt the faint tug of gravity shaping her into a circle of light. It was strange, this new form. Soft, radiant, constant. She became aware how she illuminated the world below, her glow flowing through valleys and over mountain ridges like a calm breath. She no longer commanded armies or confronted siblings with fire in her voice, but she shaped the night in her own quiet way. Shadows bent to her presence, waters mirrored her, lovers whispered beneath her light, unaware that her gaze touched their tender moments. She wondered if this new existence could be called peace. It was not warm, not entirely. There was a chill to the moon's embrace, a faint loneliness in being lifted so high above the earth she had once walked. Yet the loneliness was not empty. It was spacious, a place where her emotions could stretch without boundaries. She could feel her old desires still flickering inside her, though no longer as demands. They were softer now, echoes of longing rather than the sharp sting of unmet expectation. Recognition no longer felt like a distant prize. It felt like a quiet truth reflected back at her by every surface that caught her glow.
As she settled fully into her new shape, her memories arranged themselves like constellations across the canvas of her being. Each emotion she had carried, pride, longing, bitterness, tenderness, became a luminous fragment of a greater whole. She was not less than she had been. She was more, stretched across the sky in a form that captured the fullness of her spirit. And though she could no longer move through the world with footsteps or breath, she was present in every corner of the night, an unbroken witness to the lives unfolding beneath her. The transformation was not gentle, but its aftermath was. The storm had passed, the fire had quieted. In its place blossomed a serene luminescence that belonged only to her. She understood, with a clarity that resonated through every glowing particle, that she had not been erased, she had been rewritten. Her story had shifted from the realm of flesh and conflict into the realm of symbol and eternity. She had become a presence that could outlast the rise and fall of empires, the churn of generations, the shifting of myth itself. There was sorrow in that, yes, a sorrow for the life she would never return to, for the voice she could no longer raise in passionate defiance, for the touch of earth beneath her feet. But intertwined with that sorrow was an unexpected sense of belonging. The sky cradled her, the stars circled her with reverence. The night made space for her, as if it had always been waiting for her arrival. She was no longer a warrior demanding a place among the divine. She was part of the fabric of the heavens themselves. And so Coyolxauhqui breathed her final exhale not as a fallen sister, but as the moon, silent, luminous, and eternal.
Her glow carried the memory of everything she had been, and everything she had lost, and everything she had become. The world below would look up at her and see beauty, mystery, and a hint of sorrow, without ever fully grasping the depth of the transformation that shaped her light. Yet that was enough, more than enough. She had found her place not through conquest or recognition, but through the quiet, aching radiance that now defined her. The storm within her had calmed, but its memory lived on in her glow. And as she drifted across the sky night after night, she held all her past selves within her: warrior, sister, dreamer, beloved, broken, reborn. In the soft, silvery stillness of her new form, she became the night's quiet heartbeat, a reminder that even in tragedy, something tender can emerge. And though the world would speak of her fall, she knew the truth: she had risen. There is a softness that comes after every great upheaval, a kind of quiet that settles not because the world has grown still, but because the heart has. As Coyolxauhqui's glow spread across the sky, there was a sense that her story had not ended, but merely reshaped itself into a gentler rhythm. She had moved from motion to stillness, from struggle to shimmering calm, from the weight of form to the lightness of symbol. And yet her presence continued to pulse like a quiet reminder that endings are rarely as final as they appear. They often unfold into new beginnings, new interpretations, new echoes in the minds of those who gaze upon the night sky and wonder at the moon's soft glow. Her transformation invited reflection, not only for the gods who observed her ascent into the heavens, but for every soul beneath the sky who ever felt broken or misunderstood. There was something undeniably human in her journey, something that resonated beyond myth. Her light held the memory of conflict, desire, betrayal, yearning, and the aching need to be seen. These emotions, so deeply rooted in her celestial tale, reached into the hearts of those who watched her take her place in the night. And in doing so, she bridged the distance between divinity and humanity, becoming a mirror for the quiet struggles hidden within every person. The night sky has always been a canvas for meaning, a place where stories settle once they outgrow the boundaries of spoken words. Coyolxauhqui's presence, carved into that darkness with silvered grace, became a symbol of cycles, of rising and falling, of breaking and reforming, of losing oneself only to find an unexpected new shape. Her glow held the memory of her past, but it also whispered of resilience, a resilience that did not require her to return to who she once was. Instead, it allowed her to remain changed, softened by experience, yet still radiant with purpose. Her reflection became a guide for those who felt the push and pull of their own inner tides. She showed that conflict, no matter how devastating, could lead to transformation rather than destruction. That desire, even when it collided with duty or destiny, could carve new paths that carried meaning beyond immediate pain. That shattered pieces, when scattered far enough, might find new constellations to belong to. In her brokenness,
Coyolxauhqui revealed the tender truth that fragmentation does not erase identity. It expands it, reshaping it into forms that glow differently, but no less beautifully.
As the moon, she no longer spoke with the assertive voice of the warrior she once was. Instead, she spoke through her presence, through the gentle brightness that illuminated paths through the dark, through the soft pull of her gravity on the tides, through the subtle shifting of shadows that followed her movement. She became a silent teacher of stillness, reminding those who looked up at her that strength is not always loud or forceful. Sometimes it is the quiet endurance of continuing to shine after everything has changed. Sometimes it is the decision to exist softly in a world that once demanded hardness. Her story became an echo rather than a proclamation. It lingered in the quiet moments when someone stared at the sky, feeling emotions they couldn't name. It whispered through sleepless nights, when the moon hung low and heavy with memory. It drifted through dreams, carrying hints of her former courage, her yearning, her vulnerability. And in this subtle way, her myth seeped into the hearts of those who needed it most. For every person who felt torn between who they were and who they wished to be, her glow offered a gentle reminder that transition is not failure, it is evolution. Coyolxauhqui's journey also spoke to the power of feminine resilience, the kind that does not scream for recognition, but persists through cycles of creation and dissolution. The feminine, woven into her story like silver threads, was not defined by softness alone, nor by strength alone, but by the ability to contain both. She carried within her the quiet fire of longing, the sharp edge of pride, the deep currents of emotion that shaped her destiny. And even after her fall, after her dismemberment, after her transformation, that feminine essence did not fade. It rose with her, glowing more steadily than before, no longer confined to one form, but spread across the sky in an eternal, shimmering pulse. This is the allure of her myth, the reason it feels timeless. Coyolxauhqui did not simply fall, she became. She became something that outlasted conflict, that transcended the limitations of her previous life, that carried beauty even in its sorrow. There is something deeply addictive in witnessing such transformation, because it speaks to every hidden wound, every suppressed longing, every quiet hope that one might emerge from adversity with a light that cannot be dimmed. Her journey mirrors the internal tides that shape human emotion, the ebb of grief, the flow of desire, the slow, aching process of healing.
As the moon, she watched over the world with a kind of tender detachment, not distant, but not entangled either. Her glow was a promise that even broken things can rise, even wounds can illuminate, even endings can unfurl into something vast and breathtaking. Her myth invited reflection on the nature of memory, how some memories become weights while others become wings. Coyolxauhqui's fragments, once heavy with conflict, had become instruments of light, and in this transformation she taught that memory too can be reshaped, not discarded, but reinterpreted until it glows with a different meaning. Cycles became the quiet theme of her new existence, waxing and waning, appearing and disappearing, shifting through phases that mirrored the rhythms of the heart. She reminded the world that no feeling is permanent, not sorrow, not longing, not pride, not fear. Everything moves in cycles, returning in new forms, carrying new lessons. And through each cycle there is a chance for rebirth, not a return to what once was, but a graceful emergence into what could be. Coyolxauhqui's light lingered long after her story ended, its softness encouraging those who followed her myth to look inward, to find within themselves the same lunar resilience, the same capacity for quiet transformation, the same ability to shine even when the world had scattered them into pieces. Her reflection was not meant to offer answers, but to guide the heart toward its own, to whisper that every struggle holds the seed of renewal, and every breaking point contains the possibility of illumination. And so her story closes not with a final note, but with an echo, a gentle, shimmering reminder that the moon's glow is never truly still. It shifts, breathes, and remembers, just as every soul does when it finds the courage to soften, to rise, and to reshape its own light.